My name is Desiree. I'm 24 and I experienced God on an acid trip.
My name is Abdiel Ramirez. I'm 24 years old, and this is my wife, Desiree. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Desiree. I'm 24 years old as well. I am currently pregnant with our second child. It's a boy, and we're naming him Isaiah James. We also currently have a daughter who is a year and 3 months now. So if you hear her in the background, she's yelling.
She's like right over there.
Yeah. And we also have my sister here who's helping us babysit her.
So if you guys hear noise in the back, that's why. But we'll start off by saying that everyone that's part of our testimony, we love them. We have no unforgiveness towards them. We've been healed, and it's not to bash on anybody. It's just to show that how we grew up and how they were a part of our testimony. So yeah, it's to give honor and glory to Jesus. And just want to talk about how we grew up. I grew up in a loving Mexican home. Both of my parents were present. I'm the oldest brother we're a total of three. I have two younger brothers, and we grew up Pentecostal. We grew up in a Pentecostal church. I grew up as a pastor's grandson, so we were always at church, especially because we had services Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we were always at the church, and as we started going, I never really was into church. Like I would just go because my parents would go. I would see all my cousins there. It was like a reunion for all of us because I have a lot of cousins my age. So going to church was at the same time cool because we would see all of my cousins and we would get together, go to the store, just get together and just mess around. And it wasn't like a priority for me to seek Christ, because I had thought in my mind, you just got to be a good person if you want to go to heaven, right? Because that's what I knew is that, oh, we're all going to heaven or hell one day. So to me, I was just like, oh, as long as you're a good person, and that's what my mindset was as I was like a preteen going to church, thinking I never really paid attention to the sermons. I knew some of the words from worship, and as I was like a 10, 12-year old, I started slowly participating with my brothers and family and the kids at the youth. Whenever they wanted to do a skit or something, I would participate, and I really I enjoyed doing that, so I would always participate, but still not really seeking God, I was just in it just to do the play, so I always thought that was fun. And in church, I got to see some healings, some deliverance. It was rare, but I did get to see it, so I knew God was real. I knew that I couldn't be led astray with any other thing, So, but the thing was, whenever that would happen, when like a deliverance would happen, they would move all the kids to the other room, so that way, I don't know, they wouldn't get scared or wouldn't jump on them. I really don't know why. I always wondered like, why couldn't we get to see it? They're puking blood and stuff. So I always wondered that. And as I grew up, I started kicking it with some of my friends from high school, right? And as they started to get into smoking and drinking, was me kicking it, hanging around with them. I slowly started picking that up. Not really the drinking, just because I never really liked drinking. But the smoking really fascinated me, the music, the culture behind it, I guess you would say, the trend. And as I started hanging out with them, I slowly started smoking, opening up that door to smoking weed, getting addicted to that. Slowly my parents started catching on to me smoking, and because I would get home or my eyes were red, and like they just noticed that my eyes were never really that poofy, it was so hard for me to hide it, like especially because my eyes are like kind of big. So when they would be poofy and low, they'd be like, what's wrong, start looking at me, giving me looks. And so it wasn't very long till they started catching on to that I was starting to smoke, and during middle school, kind of tracking it back down to middle school, um after school we would walk home. We lived really close to the middle school, so we would walk home with my cousins and some other people that lived in that neighborhood. And I don't even know who told us, but someone told us that there was this porno magazine in this white garbage bin right across the fence that we walked to school from. And ever since we found out, every day after school, literally we would look forward to that. We would go and take a peek, look at it, and just continue with our day. And I noticed that like from that day on, obviously now, opened me up to lust. And from middle school, started watching pornography, because I had a cell phone, we had access to the internet, so super easy to just look into it. And from then on, I would just kind of keep it to myself. It was another thing I would just do, when I was bored or had time, stay up at night, and slowly had that addiction with the weed, and that's how that kind of began, and I never knew why we wouldn't do certain things, right? Because we grew up Christian. I just knew that we, as Christians, this is what we don't do. So I never understood a lot of the things that my parents wouldn't do when it comes to like music, why I wasn't able to listen to certain music or stuff. They would just tell me, we don't do that. So I felt like I was very closed off to things. So little by little, I started, doing it behind their backs, looking into it, especially with my friends. I was getting exposed to it. So it was almost like I had a secret life. I would do this during school, but at home, at church, I was this church kid that knew how to dress up, that knew how to sing the songs at church, and just play the part at church, I guess, but never. I guess I was like 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and so I started like discovering music and stuff, and I had this like rock era where I would listen to rock, and try to like, and I guess if you've listened to rock before, it's very like, I guess, aggressive, depressing also, and then just slowly getting into rap, right, where it's like gangster rap, it can be very prideful and stuff, and that's kind of the path as I was going, and still going to church, still, doing the doing my part in the church. Like as I grew up, I started participating in the worship team, and just trying to please my parents because they were worship leaders, they were the youth leaders, so they wanted to bring me up in that way. But here I was, doing all this, behind closed doors. I had sexual relations. I would always treat women like a piece of meat, especially with my friends. We would get together and just kind of brag about those things, and that's kind of what we would talk about, whether it was in person, in group chats or whatever. So, I began to get that mindset, especially with the pornography, it began to bring that mindset where I was just like, oh, this is who I am, and this is how you do things, this is how you get girls, this is how, and as I, as we got together, as we started talking, dating, I had that same mindset. So you can imagine that our relationship wasn't wasn't very healthy at the time, especially because we were just constantly cheating on each other. I was talking to someone else while I was with her, or just do things in person that, you it would like upset your significant other, So it became really really toxic during high school, and that was about like what 2015. We started dating in 2015, so you know, as we graduated high school, it was just a bumpy road the whole time. But it was interesting because we always kept talking. We would break up, we would always communicate and just try to work things out. So as we graduated in 2018, we decided to go into Perry Tech together, and that was in like the first winter after we graduated. So that's kind of leading up to that, and I'll do it from there.
My name is Desiree. I'm 24. I grew up in Granger, and I grew up in a Catholic household. So I have three siblings in total. So it's four of us, and I have two younger brothers and a younger sister. I was baptized as a baby, and I did my first communion when I was, I think, like 12 or 13, and then I never went back and did my confirmation. But being raised up as Catholic, my grandma was very religious. My grandma from my mom's side, she taught us how to do the prayers. She taught us how to, pray the rosary, pray to the Virgin Mary, the saints and stuff. And um, she would really you know, push for us to have a relationship with God at night, like at night. Pray to God at night. And so every night before bed, she would tell us like, oh, you got to do your prayers. So I would go to my grandma's room and I'd be there like on my knees with her, and she'd teach me how to pray. And so we would pray like the rosary and stuff. But I didn't actually have like a relationship with God. As I grew older, we kind of stopped doing that. I didn't live with my grandma all of my life. But we, like, I always knew, like, in the back of my mind, like, I need to have a relationship with God. Like, so as I grew up, it was like a constant, like, I know that, there is a God. I know that we believe in Jesus, the Holy Spirit and God the Father. We knew who we believed in and who we followed, but we didn't really get too involved with the church. We weren't very religious, we weren't very spiritual. We didn't have a relationship with God at all. We would go to church with my grandma every now and then, but hardly ever, mainly for like the events and stuff. So then from on my dad's side, I have my other grandma. She had passed away probably when I was like, I want to say 9 years old. And my parents would always tell me, like, if you're doing this or you're doing that, like, you're doing anything bad, like, your grandma's watching you. And so I always had that in the back of my mind. And it was also like, if I was doing anything, like, as a teenager, going into those teen years, it was like, oh, like, my grandma's watching me. Like, she's seen me, like, steal money or, like, steal this candy or, like, do this and that. And I was just kind of like, sorry, grandma, like, I'm just keep doing it. And then, like, my grandma that was still alive from my mom's side would also talk to us about God. She would always invite us to church. She was always going to church. She'd always, like, oh, like, tell us, God bless you, make sure that you pray, make sure that you do this and that. And so I had it in the back of my mind, like, I need to seek a relationship with him. I knew who to turn to if I was in trouble. But that was the thing, is I only did it when I was in trouble. I never actually sought him, a relationship with him. So it was just like, oh, if something ever happens, I ever get sick or I get hurt or something, like, I know I could pray to God and, call on him like if he's a genie or something. And that's how I thought of him growing up, but it shouldn't have been like that. So when I was growing up as well, my mom had told me when I was really young, we were living in this outhouse that my grandparents had. And I guess there was like a spirit that I would talk to, a little girl that I had like as a friend. And she would like tell me to do bad things or influence me to do bad things. If not, then that she would hurt me. And I was scared of her, so I would do these things, but I was just kind of like, oh, like, I know that I shouldn't be. And then my mom said that one day she woke up in the middle of the night. When she woke up, I was standing over her with a pair of scissors. She was like, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing up at this time? And then I told her, like, oh, my friend told me that I needed to cut your hair and do something with it. And she was like, no, like, you need to tell your friend that, I said this and this. And no, like, I don't want you talking to her anymore. I don't want you playing with her anymore. And, I was like, no, like, I'm scared of her. Like, she's going to hurt me. And she was like, no, like, she can't do anything to you. So she turned to my grandma and they got prayer for me. And that's all I know about it. I don't know what exactly happened. I just know that I don't remember the spirit. I don't remember anything like that. But she did tell me that when I was younger, there was, something that I would play with. And as I grew up, I always had this constant fear of, I don't know, some spirits or something being around or like always following me. I was really scared to be alone. I was, scared to get lost. I was scared, just to be in the dark or anything like that, like as a little kid. But I grew up with that constant fear, constant anxiety, especially of being alone. And I remember this one time, like as I worked in Pizza Hut. My parents went to pick me up from work because I it was in the winter time, so I didn't like to drive in the winter at night. So they went to go pick me up, and they were like, "Oh, like let's take a picture." And they took a picture, and it was just me, my mom, and my dad in the truck. And then they look back at the picture, and you can see like a figure of like a little boy or something like sitting next to me in the car. And we were like, "Do you see that? I'm not tripping, you know? Like it's in there." And we were looking at it like, what the heck, you know? And like we were just kind of like, oh, like just ignore it, just ignore it. Whenever something would happen in the house, I would tell my mom like, oh, did you hear that? Like there's footsteps. Like we would hear footsteps, doors slam, cabinets open and close, and it would just be us in the house. And she'd be like, oh, it was probably just like the draft or something, you know, like, oh, it's because the door's open, or you know, it's just an old house, you know. And we were just kind of like taught to ignore it, not acknowledge it, you know, so that we wouldn't be scared. Um, so that's what I would try to do, you know, but I was living in constant fear all the time. My parents never really did drugs or anything, but they would drink alcohol and they would listen to worldly music and throw parties and like, have gatherings and stuff like barbecues. So when we would get together, like they would drink and stuff, but it wasn't like an everyday thing. Um, and my parents wouldn't really go to church unless my grandma would invite them for like an event or something. And we didn't really know many Christians, but anytime that my parents would have an encounter with a Christian, or they knew somebody or something that was Christian, they were always very judgmental, and they would think really highly of themselves and look down on my parents. And my parents have always, we were raised to be the type of people like, you know what, like we don't care what anybody says or thinks about us, you know. It's we didn't care, you know. We lived the way that we lived. We were sinners and they knew it, they acknowledged it, and they didn't think that there was anything wrong with it. They're like, well, at least we acknowledge, you know, that we're not perfect, you know, but we don't think that we're better than anybody else. And they they just didn't really understand the difference of, you know, living in sin and being bound by sin, being enslaved to your sin, and, you know, occasionally sinning, you know, like occasionally falling into sin, because the Bible says that we're not perfect people, you know, that we're gonna sin. They didn't really, you know, see the difference between it. They're just like, oh, you know, people sin. And it was kind of like an excuse to continue doing, you know, the things that we were doing. So I grew up with like that mentality of like, you know, I'm a sinner, you know, it is what it is, you know, I believe in God, you know, I'm a good person. And that's how I grew up with that mentality, um, of thinking that being a good person was gonna save me. But deep down, I knew that there was just like a fear or something inside of me. Like if I die today, like I'm not right with God. Like I know that I need to fix things in my life. You know, there was just something in me that was just like, no, like, you know, you need to have a relationship with Him. So I always had that in the back of my mind. Like, and I was just like, no, like later, you know, I'm still young. You know, I want to live my life. I want to do things before I, you know, commit to God and, you know, live a certain way. So as I entered high school, I had a boyfriend that
Not
would
me. Wasn't
I know it was another guy that would smoke weed, and he kind of introduced it to me. He would offer it to me if he was smoking and I was there, but I would be like, no, you know, I don't really want to. I never really would do things like that. I was a straight A student. I was, you know, a good girl. I was Miss Goody Two Shoes. I wouldn't do anything bad. But when I got this boyfriend, I started, you know, um, I started like sneaking out, and I started skipping classes. So then one day I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'll do it. I'll try it. And I tried it, and it was like, to me, it was like the best high ever. It was like no experience like I've ever had before, you know. So anytime that I would smoke, it was trying to get to that first high that I had smoking weed. And as I was with him, like I didn't really like how it would make you like slow and like kind of dumb down. And he would always like kind of ditch me to smoke with his friends or like do drugs and stuff. And I later found out that he was doing other drugs behind my back. So all that kind of just led me to not liking weed anymore. And I was like, no, like I'm used to being like on top of everything, a straight A student, and I was never disappointing my parents. You know, I got caught skipping classes, I got caught with weed at school, and my parents, like, if they would hit me or slap me or anything like that, I could take it. But as soon as my parents would tell me like, Desiree, I'm disappointed in you, like that would break my heart. That's what would really like get to me. So when I had gotten caught and they told me that, I was like, oh no, like I need to stop. Like, what am I doing? Like, who am I like getting involved with? So I stopped completely. And, you know, I was still like pretty upset over this guy after we had broken up. And then that's when Abdiel came into my life, and he was supposed to be my rebound, and we ended up being together like 9 years later.
Yeah.
But he would also smoke, and he started off our relationship doing almost the same thing, ditching me to go smoke with his friends and stuff. So I really didn't like that. And that was a huge part of me, was just like, I'm not gonna end up with this guy. Like, this is just like, I don't know, like dating for fun, I guess, in high school. Like, I didn't see a future with him. To me, it was just like, oh, you know, for the time being, I guess, like to help me get over this guy. And I would tell him, you know, like I didn't want him smoking, you know, like to stop. You know, he started ditching me. I started like growing to care for him a lot more and more. And he was completely opposite in high school. I don't want to say like he was dumb or anything, but he wouldn't keep up with his
I was alright. I was
classwork.
like a B student.
He wouldn't keep up with his classwork. He was like, I don't know, just slowly like letting like his grades go and everything. And I was just like, no, like I'm gonna help you, like get your grades up, you know. And I would talk to him like, what do you have planned like for your life? Like I had like this whole plan where I was gonna go to like a 4-year university, and you know, I had these goals in my life. So when we were talking, it's like he was the complete opposite. So I was like, there's no way like I'm gonna end up with this guy, because like he has nothing like planned out, you know. And I was like, no, like let's fix that. Like let's look into it. You know, he told me he wanted to be a truck driver if all else failed. And I was like, I'm not gonna end up with a truck driver.
Yeah,
Like,
it's because my dad's a truck driver, and that was always like my backup. I'll just get my CDL like my dad and drive trucks. You know, he makes a fair amount of good money. You know.
yeah, and nothing wrong with truck drivers. I was just
Shout
like,
out truck drivers.
I just had big plans for my future, and I was like, no, like I want to be with somebody that's gonna go to college with me and like experience all of these things. So to me, it was really, really big that, you know, he took his education seriously and his future seriously as well. So we started looking into Peritech, and I started out looking into it because I was like, you know what, my dad's like a handyman, like jack of all trades. He knows how to do all of these things. You know, I loved going out there and working with him in his shops, and if he needed like help with anything, I would go with him. And he had me like changing out like these electrical outlets one time, and I really took an interest in it. And I was just like, oh, like if this is what electrical's like if I could do this, like this is easy, you know. Like people make so much money off of doing things like this. We started looking into Peritech, and I was like, I'm gonna become an electrician. We took a tour, and I was with the mindset of like I'm going into the electrical field. We took a tour of welding, automotive, um, construction,
And HVAC.
and HVAC. And like they told me, oh, do you want to try the HVAC tour? And I was like, no, I don't even know what that stands for. They're like, it's really good. Like, you know, it kind of explained a little bit. I was like, all right, fine, you know. We ended up going and taking the tour. I fell in love with the class. And I was like, okay, like if it wasn't for me being open to it on the tour, I wouldn't have switched, you know, my careers. So we ended up applying, and I got into HVAC, and he took an interest in the electrical course. So we went to Perry together. We started at the same time, and we were actually supposed to start. Like,
Yeah, and that's what's crazy is that well, we were both working at Walmart. This is like what, 2019?
yeah.
And I was actually supposed to start in the summer, and she was already in class in the winter. So I was just like, oh well, you know, like I'll save up money and try to pay out some debts so that we can have some money saved up. And then like a week later, they called me, hey, we have an open spot for spring. Do you want to take it? I was like, sure, yeah, you know. And I think another week later they call me again and they're like, hey, we have the class already started, but we have two open spots. Would you want to take one of them? And I called her and I was like, should I not? I wanted to save money, I don't have money to pay for the debt I'm gonna be in, and
I
she
was like,
convinced
take
me.
it. I was like, because to me, I was still with the mindset of like, I don't know if I'm gonna end up with this guy, but I was helping him, like get things together. I wanted to be with him. We had been together for
I think 4 years already.
since like sophomore year. Yeah, so we had been together for a while, and I was like, well, like we can try it. Like you can do it, like and we'll go through the whole program together. That means we'll graduate together because both programs were each 2 years. And he ended up doing it, so I was, so excited. It's like, okay, like things are actually kind of lining up for us to graduate together, do everything like all on time. To me, I had in my mindset if he starts later, that means he's graduating later, we're getting jobs later, like our future's not really like lining up, and we didn't really have a talk about like a long distance relationship, where we kind of knew like we were gonna go to Seattle and get jobs, afterwards. So it was kind of like, oh, like me going away for 6 months, while you're still here. Like we had trust issues in our relationship where we were like, no, like that's not really an option. So pushing like for us to start school together was a really big step, So we ended up starting at the same time. And
And we had to stop smoking,
yeah,
because I guess they drug test. So we were like, okay, we gotta stay clean, So we got clean to get into the program. And like I think like I don't know how long it was for me to realize, maybe like a month or 2 months in, that they only drug test you. I found out if you're sleeping in class, if you're failing, or if you're constantly like absent. That's when they would drug test you. It wasn't really a random drug test. So I was like, oh, for sure, like I'll just make sure I'm on top of my grades, I don't miss, and I'm not sleeping. And honestly, I, there's other people that do it. I'm gonna start smoking too. So it was a little risky, but um, I could have gotten kicked out, but I still did it the whole way. So, I had stopped smoking just a bit.
yeah, and I had stopped smoking when I was in high school, so it wasn't really an issue for me. And then I think the last 2 or 3 months of the course before we graduated, we were able to go on externship and find jobs. So we were able to go to Seattle or like find our jobs wherever we wanted. And then when we graduated, it was an option to come back for graduation and, just take a day off of our work. But we had our first jobs lined up. So we went up there and I ended up finding a job pretty quickly. And that kind of pushed him to hurry up and like find a job as well. And we started looking. I got a job and we got into an apartment. And I think after a couple days after we got moved into our apartment is when he found a job. And we made the move up to Seattle together.
To Kent, to be exact. For those who are from Seattle, who live there, it was Kent.
Yes.
We would just say Seattle because if a lot of people would be like, "Where's that?" So we're like Kent. That's where we were living. But yeah, we had during Perry we couldn't I couldn't smoke as much. I was trying to stay like I would smoke as little as I can just in case I had to get clean. I would be able to do it. So a lot of people say in Perry you become drinkers, So that's kind of what sparked drinking in me. Not beer because I still could not do beer. I've never gotten drunk off beer because it feels like I'm drinking pop. It's carbonated and I just never liked it. I got into liquor just because one, it was faster and it was not carbonated, right? So that's kind of how we were moving up to Kent. We were drinking already and we had stopped. Before we graduated, we had stopped smoking because we were thinking, all right, we don't know if they're gonna drug test us for the work, so we got to get clean. So again, we got clean before we got into our new jobs, and then we were living in Kent. That when we moved in, it was 2020, right? In October.
It was 2020 of October.
Yeah.
So we were no longer living with our parents, and once we got our jobs, we were like, oh well, we could start smoking again, and so we slowly started smoking again, and we didn't have to hide it or like put our drops, and you know, unless we were going down to visit our family, then it was like, okay, you need to have your eye drops and all that handy, you know. Try to hide everything, smells and stuff like that from our parents. They used to get in our car or something, and I would be so paranoid, like, oh my God, like, does it smell like weed in here? Like, does it stink in here? You know, like, they're gonna say something. We'd always be like paranoid, like, how are my eyes? You know, how's this? How's that? It was like if we were living like a whole second life. You know, we'd come back to our parents and we had like this standard of like who we were, and we'd go away and, you know, we weren't doing crazy drugs, but we were smoking weed. And to us, it wasn't a huge deal because um, I say like we were functioning fiends. Like we were like fiending for weed, but we weren't like, I don't know, like these potheads that were just staying at home in mom's living room, you know, like no future going for them. We were like, oh, we have our careers, we went to school, you know, like we've got our life started for us. So smoking weed, like we can do it, you know, like there's no biggie. Like I don't understand like what our parents, you know, see so wrong about it. And so we started to smoke quite a bit more.
Yeah, I started just slowly buying more pipes, bubblers, bongs, and just getting all the more equipment, more tools, just for different ways to get high. And especially because at that time we were already 21, so we were just like, oh, you know, excited to go to the dispensaries and stuff. So just slowly, just building our stuff up, you know, and
Trying to get, as I started smoking again, I was trying to reach that high that I had first felt when I first started smoking. And I was always like reaching for that experience because there was no high like your first time. So to me it was like, oh, like that was my goal. Any other time it was like I didn't like how drowsy and slow and stuff it made me feel. So it took a while for me to actually get into it, to smoke every single day. I would do it like once a week and then twice a week, you know. Slowly started doing it more and more. We started going to the gym, and I would take my inhaler and I would take a hit of our dab pen. And I had a lot of anxiety, so my inhaler kind of like would make me a little bit more jittery. And then I took my dab pen, and it was during COVID, so we hadn't been around like a lot of people. We went to the gym, and I literally had an anxiety attack at the gym because I was freaking out, like, oh my God, you know, like there's so many people, like I felt clustered, you know, I couldn't breathe, like I started crying and panicking. And then we left, and I was like, okay, you know, like instead of dropping the weed or dropping like the dab pen, you know, I was like, okay, I'm not gonna take my inhaler no more. Like I'm not gonna do that anymore, you know. So I kind of, I would still try to smoke when I would go to the gym and stuff. We were, you know, at that point where we would smoke every day, and we were trying to like, we wanted to reach, you know, a a better high. So we started getting into bongs and stuff, and we wanted to try something else like shrooms, but we were kind of scared because our relationship still was rocky. You know, we were how many years in, and probably like we started dating 2015.
so 6 years together, and we're still, you know, having
On and off, you know, being toxic and, you know, cheating on each other, talking to other people, you know, like it really calmed down when we lived together in Seattle. But, you know, there was still a lot of trust issues, you know, a lot that we had done where, you know, we needed to fix our relationship. So,
we had heard that you had to be in a good mindset if you ever want to take shrooms or any psychedelics. So we're just like, oh, we're not ready, you know.
yeah, and well, being up in Seattle, we were on our own a lot, and I didn't have friends up there. When we moved to Seattle, him and his classmates all got hired like at the same company, so they all moved to the same apartment complex that we had moved to. So they were always getting together and stuff, and he would leave like to go play soccer or something, or go hang out with his friends, and I would try to be friends with their girlfriends, but I wasn't like your typical girly girl that, you know, would kind of like get along with girls like that. I was just more like on my own and more quiet and stuff. So I would stay home. If not, I would just go watch him play soccer, but I didn't want to like just be out there. So I would just be home, and I would tell him all the time, like, don't be leaving me here. I don't want to be here by myself. You know, I'd get so scared. I'd get so paranoid. Like I would wash clothes And then I'd come out of the bathroom and I'd be like, what the heck? Like the clothes are still washing. And I'd look and like the lid was just open. And I was like, okay, it's like halfway through the cycle and the lid's just open. Like I'm the only one here. Like who stopped it? It was little things like that. Like we would hear footsteps, doors would close, again, like all of these things were still happening. I still had that fear, that anxiety, smoking. Nothing was really helping. It was just making things a lot worse.
It was crazy just because I never heard any of that. Like, it was only when she was alone. So I was like, why? That's crazy. And that's it. We would just leave it,
Yeah, and like there was, my parents would always tell us, like, oh, like don't sleep with like mirrors in front of your bed. So we in our room, our closet was two big old mirrors, and it's literally like right in front of our bed. And I was just like, oh, I would get so scared, and I'd be like, oh, let's cover it with the savana, like let's get a blanket, hang it up and stuff. And I would do that, and he'd just be like, okay, like you and like your superstitions.
Like, I never heard of that, so I was just like, why do you want to? All right, whatever. It's like, if it helps you sleep, whatever. So I'll cover for you. It's no biggie. It's just annoying having to do that every night.
Yeah, so we would cover it, and then I think the night that we did it.
Yeah, I think it was crazy. I think we were high. We didn't cover it. I was like, whatever. It's like, you in your blanket, just leave it, And that night, I don't know if it was a weekend or not, or I woke up for work. I don't know, but I woke and I had a dream. And in that dream, I was in bed, laying on the left side of the bed. And there was this, like, it looked like a boy figure, like a small little spirit, just looking down at me. And in my dream, I realized it. And in my dream, I woke up, like, realized that it was looking at me. And then it runs and just dives like Superman into the mirror. And I was like, and then I woke up just like with fear gripping me. I was just like, what the heck was that? Like.
So he told me, and I was like, oh, now you don't, like, now do you believe me?
Ever since then, I was like, all right, we'll cover your mirror.
Yeah, but I was like, there's something here. Like, there's something that follows me or something. And I had told him, like, the story of when I was a little girl. There was also another spirit that I would talk to when I was younger, and it was a little boy as well. I don't know much about that story, but when he had told me that, I was like, okay, like, then the picture, that we took with my parents, and, there was a little boy there. I was like, it has to be a spirit or something that's following me, or I don't know, but there was something in the apartment. There was something that was there with us all the time. So we were living in constant fear, and that's part of the reason why we didn't want to do mushrooms, our toxic relationship, the constant fear that we were living in. We were never in the right headspace for it.
Yeah, and as time went on, other than that, we just kind of ignored it. We still weren't seeking God. We were just kind of going about our lives, working. Everything was good, and our relationship started getting a little bit better.
So we had. Our relationship was getting a little bit better because we were away, we were living together, we weren't constantly cheating on each other, but we still had trust issues, and we, had been together for so long that we were like, you know what, like, we made it work for so long, like, we do want to be in each other's lives and stuff. We talked about, like, getting married and having a family and kids and stuff. So it was something that we wanted to do, and he ended up proposing to me in August. So we got engaged, and we were engaged for a couple months until December. So
December what?
It's December 2nd. I remember the day specifically.
Yeah, we had gotten engaged, and so we thought, we're like, okay, we're good. I feel like we're ready. We didn't get the psychedelics right away, but I had that in the back of my mind, like, okay, like, we should be good. And so I had switched companies. They were laying a bunch of people off. They were getting slow. So my coworker and I moved to another company. We worked with the same contractor. And it was just him and I. We had our own truck, and we would go to the job sites. So I got to spend a lot of time with him during the drives. And a couple months in, he tells me he has some acid on him. And I was like, oh, what? Like, how much do you sell it for? I had been hearing about it, because on YouTube, a lot of a podcast with a guy named Joe Rogan would pop up, and I was very interested, intrigued with the experiences he would talk about. And I was like, man, like weed doesn't make you feel like that. Like I kind of want to try that. I also was getting bored of the weed. It would make me feel drowsy, and just because I had been gotten used to the feeling, even though I was switching it up with water pipes, right? Like bongs, bubblers, and pens. So, he had it, and I was like, how much? How much do you sell it? Me thinking it was gonna be expensive. He's like, oh, $10. I was like, oh, okay. And then he pulls out his sheet, and then he tells me there are these little squares. I was like, $10. I was like, these little things. I was like, how do you take them? He goes, oh, you just put them on your tongue, and then you just wait for it. I was like, oh, okay, for sure. I was like, oh, I'll cash app you. And then I told my wife later on that day, hey, I got some acid, let's take it this week, and we'll see how it is. And, that weekend came, and it was like about 5 o'clock. We were sitting on the couch watching music videos, and we're like, oh, let's take it, are you ready? We rip it into 4 little squares. I take a quarter, she takes a quarter, and then we're just kind of walking around, eating snacks, just waiting for the effect. An hour later, I asked her, do you feel anything? She's just like, no. She's like, maybe we didn't take enough. So we take the other quarter, so we ended up taking half. And
we had gone outside to our car to go listen to music, because we would listen to music in our apartment, and we had this surround sound with what is it, the little thing,
the sub?
Yeah, with the sub. And it would shake the walls of the apartment, and so our neighbors would like text him and be like, hey, can you guys, the music is fine, but like turn off like the surround sound. Like,
and I was like, nah, they're tripping. I touched the wall, but it's rattling.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, no way. Okay,
so we decided, okay, we're gonna go outside and listen to music. And we had smoked some weed along with like taking like the little pieces of acid, to help speed up the effects. So we went outside to go listen to music, and we were listening to music in our car. And then we were like, oh my God, like it's so loud. Like the car was shaking. And we were like, instead of our neighbors hearing us, now the whole apartments were like hearing us.
We thought listening outside with the sub in my car would be better. We were just making more noise outside. And we're like, dude, what are we doing? Like how many, like it was like 3 songs in. We're like, let's go back inside.
Yeah, so we started going back inside, and as we were like walking up the steps.
And this was like what, 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
So it was dark,
It was already like, dark. As we were walking up the steps to our apartment is when I kind of like, it took me a minute to get up the steps, because that's when I started to feel like the acid kick in. And so I was like, oh, okay, like now I feel it. We went inside, went into the apartment, and he's like, oh, like we'll listen to music, watch music videos and listen to music, but with the bass off, because it would rattle the walls.
It wasn't off, it was just low.
Yeah.
So. I love bass. So and we realized like we were feeling it, because I had my hand still, but it was doing this. So I was like, what? Like, do you feel that? I'm feeling it, all excited. And like how she was saying, we were just listening to just the music we would listen to on the daily, it was, I'll name a couple artists. It was like Mac Miller, Travis Scott, Kid Cudi.
So we started with Travis Scott, because we were like, oh, like his music, it's like kind of trippy, like I know some people like really listen to his music to party and stuff. So we put on Travis Scott, and then it just felt so heavy, so demonic, and we were like, okay, like let's take this off, like we don't want to watch this. We switched it to Kid Cudi, and with Kid Cudi, I would listen to his music on a daily basis. And his music was very sad and depressing, and like it felt like he was crying out for help. Like I could feel his pain, and I felt so sorry for him. Like I wanted to cry for him, and I was like, oh my God, like I was telling him like he's going through so much, like, and he's like crying out for help in his music. Like I wanted to help him. I was just like, take this off, like. And after that, my headspace had already changed. Like I was already upset, like down in the dumps, and I was like, okay, let's just put on, some more upbeat music. So we put on Mac Miller, and it was the last album that, he made before he had passed away. So we were listening to that, and it just felt like sad and depressing, and we were just like, okay, like let's take this one off, put on something a little bit more upbeat, like The Weeknd. And we had that one I had watched that video. I was never really into watching the music videos. He was, but that the Weekend music video by Mac Miller, I had seen it, and when I was watching it, it was like, I don't know if like you can see things with when you're on acid that you can't with your natural eye, but I could see flashes of like these, I don't know, like demons in the music video, while we were watching it, and it was really scaring me. I was like, oh my god, like did you see that? Like are you seeing like what's going on in like the music video? Like did you see like the images that were displaying, you know? And he was like, yeah, and it really freaked me out. I was like, just take this off. It's like, just take this off. I don't want to listen to this music anymore. It had scared me so bad. I was so scared. I was like, just shut it off. Like, we're going to bed. Like, let's just go to sleep, you know. He took off the music, and I was like kind of pacing back and forth, like scared, like, oh my God, like, what did we do? You know, like, did we open a door to something? You know, like, did we sell our souls? Like, I was trying to ask him without saying that, you know, but I had this fear inside of me, like, did we make a deal with the devil that we didn't even know? You know, it's like, I never spoke out the words, you know. I was like, oh, I thought you have to like sign a contract, you know, like this whole thing, you know, in order to sell your soul. But it literally felt like I was in the hands of the devil. Like I was his, you know. And I was like, oh my God, like we did something, you know. Like in that moment, it felt like we were just puppets that the devil was playing with, like with these chains around our ankles. It felt like I had these chains around my ankles that I couldn't see, and I was trapped to my apartment where I couldn't leave, I couldn't do anything, you know, and the devil was just gonna torture us. And I literally thought that I couldn't leave, you know. And he was like, you're tripping, like you're on acid, you know, like
I'll try to remind her, like, baby, you're on acid, you know, you're on the drug, you know, like you're fine, we're here, you know, like you're not trapped, the door's open. I would literally open the door. And all this that she was explaining, she was yelling this. And we have upstairs and downstairs neighbors, and it was like maybe like 12 o'clock at night. So I was like, baby, like you're gonna wake up the neighbors. Like,
I was scared. I was like, I don't care. Like, it doesn't matter. You know, I was like, what neighbors are you talking about, dude? Like, we're trapped in, that's the least of my concerns, you know? Like, I was like, I'm trying to break out of these walls. Like, literally, it felt like if I was like in this cardboard box as a doll that the devil was playing with. And I was like, we need to break out of here. As soon as we get out of here, like, we can find out how to, you know, like leave. You know, it felt like we were in hell. And I was trying to like, I literally ran into we had this jean rack. Like, it was like a bookcase, but we would put our jeans on it. And I ran into this jean rack, and I was like, I'm gonna break through these walls. And he grabbed me, and he's like, don't do that. Like, you're gonna,
because there was stuff on top. Yeah. Literally, it was gonna tip over. I was like, what are you doing? Like, trying to calm her down because she was freaking out. And
as soon as I hit it, I was like, wait, what the heck? Like, okay, yeah, you know, like I'm tripping, you know. Like I thought to myself, like, what am I doing? Like, I'm literally trying to break through the walls. Like, if I had a hammer, I probably would have broken through the walls. And I was just like, okay, we need to do something, you know. I was like, oh, like the Bible, like we need to read the Bible, like we need to like call on Jesus, you know. Like I knew, you know, like from my past, you know, like I was in trouble, like I know who to call, I know who to turn to, you know. And thank God for that, you know, that I had that seed planted in me, you know, from a young age, where I was like, I knew that, you know, Jesus was my Lord and Savior. So we were like, okay, we have a Bible. I had a Catholic one that my grandma gave me, and I also had just a regular Holy Bible that I had gotten as well. And so we opened that up, and we were trying to read it. You know, we sat on the couch, and we were reading like the first book of Genesis, or the first line in Genesis, where it's like, in the beginning, you know, was the heavens and the earth. We could not get past that line for such a long time. We could not focus. Like, we were on a drug, you know. So we were rereading it and like trying to understand, and it was just so confusing, and we couldn't. And I was so scared, you know, and like I was fidgeting like with my ring the entire time. And then I don't know, it was weird. Like, I had hallucinations that were starting, but my ring would turn into like this ugly metal, or I don't even know what it was. It was just turning into something, and I would get it, and I threw it, and I was like, oh my God, like what is that? You know, like I don't want this, you know. And he just kind of looked at me, and I was like, oh, you know, like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, you know. Like I don't understand what was going on. I just knew that, you know, the ring around my finger, like it just kind of made marriage feel like an ick to me, you know. And now I see like it was probably like an attack from the enemy, you know, trying to plant that seed that we shouldn't get married or something, messing with my mindset. And then I would like kind of step back, like, what the heck, like, what's going on? Like, I didn't mean that, you know, like, I do want to get married. And we kept trying to read the Bible. And I was so scared from the feeling that, you know, like, reading the Bible wasn't gonna work. I was crying and crying, and then I look up, and as I look up, there's like this glowing white light. Like, it wasn't like our light, like in our room or anything. It was just like a supernatural like light, and I knew that it was the Holy Spirit or an angel or something, you know, like sent from God. And it was just so divine. Like, it was just like this beautiful white light, and it just felt like it was reaching inside of me, like from my stomach, pulling out like these knots. And as every time that it would pull it out, like, I was crying, and I would choke up, like if I was like gonna throw up. And I would like cough it up, and nothing would come out, but I was like choking up like these knots. And it happened like 3 or 4 times, and each time that it would come up and out of me, it just felt lighter. Like, my whole body just felt lighter. Like, I just felt more and more at peace. And finally, like, I was done. The light like went away. I was done crying. Like, I was done choking up. Whatever these things were as well. I felt so much lighter, and I was like, okay, like, let's move this to the room. Like, let's just go try to read in our bedroom. So we picked everything up. We went to our bedroom, and at the time we had 2 cats. Those were our babies, you know, Luna and Athena. And these cats were everything to me. Like, I love these things as if they were my own kids. Like, there was one time that he had gotten my cat in trouble because she scratched him. Like,
She clawed my back, and I
did.
threw her.
And I literally cried. Like, I bawled because he like hurt my baby. But like, that's how much these cats meant to me. And we were there, and we were still trying to read the beginning, the first page of the book of Genesis, you know, and we couldn't get past it. And as we're sitting there trying to read, I started getting these other hallucinations about this star that was telling me, you can be your own God like me, you know, like I can show you, you know, like, just like open yourself up to it. And like, a part of me like wanted to, but then I was like, no, like I know better. Like, I know that I serve a God. Like, I know who God is. It's Jesus, you know. Like, I knew who I believed in. And I was like, no, like, this is wrong, you know. And I would come back out of that hallucination, and I was in my room trying to read my Bible, and I would tell him, you know, like, oh, like, I seen this and this, and you know, this happened. And then I had another hallucination where I was in a marketplace, and we were walking with like our basket and like getting groceries and stuff, and I could see my daughters. Like, I had daughters at home, 2 girls, and I was like, we need to hurry up and we need to get home to them, you know, like, hurry up here, and we need to get back home to our daughters, you know. And as soon as like I would get out of that hallucination, I'd come back, and we were in our bedroom again, still reading the Bible. And I look at him, and I'm like, what are we doing? Like, we need to get our daughters, you know, like, what are we doing here? Like, why are we still here? Like, I need to go back. Like, our babies are at home. And he's looking at me like, what are you talking about?
Like, what are you talking about? We have no kids right now. Like, you talking about the cats, you know? Like, I was just like, while she was explaining this, I'm like watching her, like, oh, I feel so bad. She's tripping out. My poor baby, you know, like, and I was calm. I was trying to calm her down through all this while she was explaining this to me.
And after I came back from the hallucination about the marketplace, I see my 2 cats, like, they were sitting like at my knees on my bed, and I see them, and they turn into like these nasty rodents, like, cat-sized rats. Like, it was just gross. And I was like, oh my God, like, I, you know, yelled at them to get off of like the bed and stuff. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, he was like, what are you doing? I was like, did you not see that? Like, they're disgusting. Like, that's nasty. I was like, oh my God, like, that was disgusting. Like, they're rodents, like, they're rats on my bed, you know? And then I looked at them again, and they were my cats, and they were just looking at me like hurt, you know, like, how, like, you kicked us off the bed.
We were just chilling on the couch.
I know. And so I kicked them off, and after that, I kid you not, I never seen my cats the same. Even after everything, months later, I don't see them the same. I
Now
don't see
they're all
cats the
dead.
same. Yeah, they all passed away. Rest in peace, Luna and
It's
Athena.
because we brought them back to our parents' house and we put them outside, and slowly they started disappearing.
Yeah.
But anyways,
Yeah. So, anyways, back to the testimony. Um, I would hallucinate about the marketplace, and then see these cats, and then my next hallucination was I was in this classroom. So the way that it started was, I don't know if you've seen the movie Harry Potter, but when they take out like a memory or something and they put it into the bowl, and you put your head in the bowl and you can see the memory. So as I entered this hallucination, it was like if I was taking my head out of the bowl, and I look up and it's, Jesus. I see Jesus in like his white clothes, his sandals, and I can't see his face, but I can see his hands, and his hands had holes in them. And there was like a classroom of students. It was like if we were in heaven and Jesus was teaching the classroom or something. And he was just asking me, like, are you done? Do you need to go back? Like, are you done? Like, how many more times? And I would just look at him like so confused. And then I just put my head back in the bowl. As I would put my head back into the bowl, I would come out of the hallucination, again, reading my Bible. And I'd look at him and I'm like, what the heck? And I would tell him, like, now I seen this and this, and it kind of felt like if acid was like this drug that would open you up to kind of see that there was something more to life. Like if this living on earth was not, where we're meant to be. Kind of like a test. What's that movie with where it's like a simulation? I've told you about it before.
Is that the Matrix?
Yeah, the Matrix.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was like if we were like in a Matrix or something. That's what acid made life feel like. So after each hallucination, it was like we were back into like, I don't know, this thing where it was like the Matrix or something, where we were supposed to be somewhere else, but here we are stuck here because it was like a test that we were going through or something. And I was going through these hallucinations for hours, and it was the same three over and over and over again. And I stood up and I had the Bible in my hand. I don't know if I stood up to read or to get a glass of water or something, but I had it in my hand. And when I stood up, it literally turned into like a pile of like poop in my hands. And I was like, oh my God, like, and I threw it and I was like, it's a pile of like crap, And he just looked at me so like mad, like, what are you saying? And I was like, I don't know, like, I didn't mean that. Like, I didn't mean to say that. Like, I don't know why it came out. Like, it was like if something came over me. I was like, I never in my right mind would I say something like that, like about the Bible. And I just picked it up and I was like, I'm sorry. And I came back, sat in bed, kept going through these hallucinations, and the last time I took my head out of the bowl and I was back in this classroom with Jesus. And he looks at me and he tells me like, okay, like, you're done. Like, you need to make a choice now. He's like, are you going to keep going back? Are you going to live in this cycle? Are you going to go back into this world, living the same cycle? Or are you going to stop and live for me? And I just looked at him and I was like, I know what to do. And I put my head back into the bowl, came back to reality, reading the Bible with my husband. And I was like, okay, like, let's put these Bibles away. Like, we're obviously not going to finish the whole Bible in one night, or I thought that if we read the whole Bible in that night, like, we would be saved, like the devil would be done playing with us, like it would get us out of like this loop that we were in. I was like, obviously we're not going to finish the Bible tonight. So we put it away and I was like, I know what I need to do. And I told him about it, like, we need to follow Jesus. Like, we need to seek him, like, we need to change the way that we're living. Like, what we're doing is not right. So we decided, like, okay, we're not going to do acid anymore. Like, we're not going to continue in this. So we went to bed. It was like 5:00 in the morning when we went to bed. And like, I had stopped tripping. Like, the hallucinations completely stopped. The drug started to kind of wear off. It was still like, we could still kind of feel like some of the effects, but
it felt jittery.
yeah,
It felt like you drank like I don't know, like a C4 or coffee, you know, without eating that morning. You just felt jittery. That's how it felt.
Yeah.
Even that morning, we just still felt jittery.
And that next day, we had planned a secret Santa with some of our friends that we were um, friends with over there in Seattle. And so we were like, oh, okay, like tonight we have that secret Santa that we're gonna go to, you know. We had gone with them and we would smoke with them all the time. And we got there and it was same thing, another kickback, you know, listening to music. They started out playing the exact same music that we started tripping out to. And it was Travis Scott, it was Kid Cudi, it was Drake, it was Mac Miller, it was all the music that we would listen to on a daily basis. And we were just kind of like, we shouldn't be listening to this music. Like they were smoking too, and they were like, oh, you know, like, do you guys want to hit, you know? And we were like, no. They're like, come on, come on. And we're like, all right, fine. We ended up smoking like a little bit, not as much as we normally do. And we were listening to this music and it just kind of felt heavy all over again. And it felt like the same presence, the same energy, the same everything as when we were in our apartment, you know, and had experienced this. And we were like uncomfortable, you know. So we went home that day and we were like, we're not going to listen to music like that anymore. Like, obviously it was the music because we were listening to that music and it made us feel that exact same way. So we were like, okay, we're going to cut out these mainstream artists that are obviously, you know, involved in some like demonic activity, you know. So we were like, okay, no Travis Scott, no Mac Miller, no Kid Cudi, like none of like no Taylor
like
Swift,
no
like,
mainstream, you know. 'Cause
yeah,
that's what it was for us. And it was crazy because during that time we were hanging out with those friends. We told them about our acid trip. Like, bro, we tripped out on acid last night. We told them what happened and what she seen, and they were just like laughing, like, you know, haha, you had a bad trip, you know, like
yeah,
this and that. That's crazy. But we were just like, dude, like our eyes, we were just shocked. Like, I felt like our eyes were open to that. You know, to like really seeing the spiritual side of things. It almost felt like, and we're just like, how do you not see? Like, we're kind of telling you, like, this is, you shouldn't be listening to this, but you're just kind of
they're
backing
just
it
like,
off.
oh, like that was just your bad experience.
You know, it was, can't blame them. You know, that's exactly how we were. You know,
Yeah.
so we were just like, dude, what? Like, what's going on? You know, is it just felt like it was just us? You know, like, okay, that we had this awakening moment. You know, because like, even though I didn't really trip out, I was calming her down, but hearing her experience and telling me what was going on in her trips, her visions, I was just like, this is crazy, you know. And like how she was saying, we had stopped listening to music first. That's kind of like what we stopped first. Well, first was acid. We were just like, we're not doing acid anymore. And second was music. We're like, oh, okay, like how do we? All right, like we're for sure not gonna listen to mainstream artists. And then we still kept on smoking. We were just like, all right, no more acid. So we kept on smoking. I think one time we were watching, I was really into the show Ink Master. And I think one of the characters, he had like a big old Illuminati tattoo with an eye. And we were watching it, and for some reason, she just tells me to just like take it off. We were high. I think we had hit the bong.
Yeah, we had hit the
And, like,
bong that
triggered her.
night, and it was so strong that it felt like if we were on acid again. It felt like that same high, and we were sitting there, and as soon as like I see it was like a triangle, like a pyramid with an eye in the middle that this guy had like tattooed on his neck, and like the camera had like passed by it, and I seen it, and then it went back into it, and it literally like zoomed into his neck, like for some reason, like it's not like they were showing that tattoo. It was just like a guy that was on the show, and it just zoomed into it. And when it did that, it was like if it just opened up that door again. And I felt that presence. It freaked me out. It scared me, and I was like, take it off. I was like, I don't want to watch this anymore. And he was like, what happened? And I told him, you know, like it did this and this, you know. I was like, and I feel it again. Like I feel that heaviness. And so he took it off, and after that we were like, okay, no more bong rips. Like that made me like really close to like the high, like on the acid trip.
It would make us feel paranoid. So we're just
Yeah.
like, okay, we're not getting that high on the bong. And then we actually stopped using the bong. We're just like, because it gets us really high, and it makes us trip out. So we're like, no.
And it
more
was
bong.
crazy because before we took acid, we would hit the bong every single day, trying to get to like this crazy experience or this other high, we could never experience that. After doing acid, it would get us to it right away. So we were like, no more. Like we don't want to take hits of the bong anymore. So we tried posting it and we were like, we're gonna sell it, get rid of all our stuff. But then we were like, how are we gonna like sell it to somebody, and we're trying to tell people like, hey, like you probably like shouldn't be hitting the bong, or like you shouldn't be listening to this music, and we're gonna give it to somebody else to like enable them to continue doing it. So it took us a while. It sat in our closet for a while, and we continued to smoke out of like the pipes and the bubblers and stuff. So we what made us stop?
Well, we were thinking like, okay, we felt right during this trip like we allowed something in our apartment. We didn't know exactly what or how, right? Because obviously it was we allowed something in our lives because we were in sin, right, in fornication. But especially with this acid trip, we're like, we let something in here. How do we get this out?
Yeah, so I was like, we need to do a limpieza. I had heard about like sage, like cleaning your home with sage, but we never looked into it. I was just like, I know some people do it, so I was like, oh, there was like botanica, is that what it's called? Like the witchcraft stores,
Yeah,
right around the corner from where we lived. And I would pass by it every single day going to and from work. When we would go out, we would pass by it all the time. And we were like, oh, we need to stop there and get the sage. Oh, we need to stop there and get the sage. I don't know why it didn't click for us that it was at a witchcraft shop that they sold it,
that's
but
crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
I forgot about that.
But we were trying to get this, for some reason we were just like, oh, next time. We never ended up getting it, or we would just forget, or like just wouldn't go. And so we were actually looking up like videos on, I think, cleaning your house with sage, or like opening up your third eye, or things like that, because that's what it felt like we had done when we had tripped out on acid. I was thinking like, did we open our third eye or something? Like there was times where I felt something on my forehead. I was like, I don't know if that was just me being paranoid or something, but I was like, oh my god, like, is there an eye? Like I literally tripped out one time, and I was like, is there a third eye on my head? So we started looking into that, and we came across Everett from Pastor Vlad's church.
No, it was Vlad first.
Oh,
we didn't know it was Vlad. We were just like, oh, look, this video says exposing New Age.
Yeah.
We're like, okay, let's watch it. We start watching it, and you're like, oh, okay. Like, oh, dang. Like, we were about to do all this. He starts saying that it actually opens up the doors to more demons. Basically saying anything spiritual that's not from God is demonic. I was like, all right, for sure. Like, thank God we didn't do anything crazy, because we would have made things worse. And we started just watching more videos from him, and then he started talking, like we were watching his videos talking about deliverance. So we started watching his deliverance videos. We're like, what? Showing her like, look at this is crazy, like people are manifesting, screaming, the demons speaking out what it was, how it got in, and
so
and
from
how
Vlad,
long.
we started watching Vlad, Everett, Mike Signorelli, Isaiah Saldivar, Pagani, Bob Larson. Like we were watching all of these pastors on YouTube, and they pretty much became our church while we were up there. So we decided, okay, like they were talking about like the music and how that also opens you up to things, your spiritual eyes and ears, like whatever you let in, you're letting into your spirit, and it affects you, like you're coming into agreement with those things. And then the way that you talk, you speak life and death over yourself. So we stopped cursing, and we used to curse like with everything that we would say. Now we get like our Snapchat memories from years ago, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like look at how bad we would talk. Like we just for fun, just throw in an F word or something, and we stopped talking like that. We started speaking life over ourselves, our situations. We stopped listening to all music that wasn't Christian music, because they were also talking about, like the things that you listen to comes into play with,
We had started reading the Bible, because after that it was like all this was all like together, us stopping weed, stopping music, and starting to read the Bible and seek God. So we were just like, let's not be biased just because she grew up Catholic, I grew up Christian, and let's just read the Bible. Like
we
whatever
always
it
had,
says, that's what we'll do.
we had always had that conflict in between, where it was like we would try not to talk about it, but it would come up. Like if we had kids, what are we gonna do? Like, are they gonna grow up Catholic or Christian? Are they going to be baptized when they're little? Are they not? Like, how are we going to raise them? I'm like, 1 week in your church, 1 week in my church. That's kind of how we were just like, oh, like, we'll get to it when we come to it.
Yeah,
We would
we'll
kind of
cross
put it
that
off.
bridge once we get there.
Yeah, so we were like, you know what? Like, once we experience this, we were like, let's actually do the research ourselves instead of my family grew up like this and they're telling me this, and your family grew up like this and they're telling you this. Let's just figure it out ourselves. So we did a lot of research. We dove into denominations like crazy. Even different religions, like we weren't really looking into different religions like Buddhism and things like that.
But I did want to know what the difference was. Like,
Yeah.
why are people, what is it that they believe in, right? Especially because once we figured out that a lot of this new age stuff, right, or chakras and stuff, because I used to watch like Naruto, and I'm just like, oh, that's all Hinduism. Like, slowly just started picking all this up and really learning about the differences, especially like how she was saying with denominations, just because I was like, all right, like after realizing, all right, it's Christianity that we're leaning towards, which denomination, and then figuring out, okay, there's a thing called just being a non-denomination. I was like, okay, that's pretty much what we are. We just follow the Bible. But then nowadays it's even more confusing because even like the LGBTQ churches call themselves non-denomination. So it's like, all right, we just follow the Bible, like that's what we say now. But as we started reading, we had came across Proverbs 18:21, where it says life and death are in the power of the tongue. So we're like, I feel like the Lord was really revealing to us why music was such a big influence and why it's important, and really spoke to us like, okay, what we're saying, what we're speaking over, what we're singing matters. Like, we could be singing this depressing song, this gangster rap song, and no wonder why I feel so prideful, no wonder why I'm getting, feeling this desire to lust, desire to feel depressed, or, it was just like clicking all at once.
And
like,
music
okay.
really had an effect on me. Like, I would put on music like Kid Cudi and Mac Miller and like all of these other artists as well, to be sad. And I would put it on and I'd put it on to cry, and it would I wouldn't even be having a bad day. If I would listen to a certain song and then he'd get home, I'd be mad at him because the song was talking about men cheating, and I'm like, oh, I remember that day that you did this to me, and it was just like so big for me. It had a really huge effect on me. And
that was the complete opposite. I was always listening to upbeat music.
Yeah.
So when we would go to work together at Walmart, we would carpool, and she'd be listening to some depressing music, and I would just be staring at the window, and
I'd be like, "What's wrong? Like, are you okay?" He's like,
"It's your music." I was like, "I don't know. What do I say?" Like, I'm just listening to the song and just looking out the window.
He's like all sad out the window. So yeah, we stopped listening to all worldly music. And we started looking for Christian artists, started replacing our music. And in all of this time that we had made all of these changes, we hadn't gone down to see our family for, we got married the 11th. So we hadn't gone down to see them for 9 days. So for those 9 days, we were researching, doing all of these things, cutting things out of our lives. We went down, we got married through the court. And then we went back up to Seattle, continued to do that for I want to say another 2 weeks. And
like, we were reading and seeking, but we were still smoking. The music, for sure, we left. It was a little difficult at first because I just couldn't. I knew some artists because I used to listen to Christian music when I was like 10, 12 years old. But I didn't know anything that was out yet, so it was kind of difficult to transition. But I was just like, you know what? And also, like, realizing when we would feel that demonic presence, we would just for sure always lean back to worship music, and that would always make everything just feel so much better. So we're just like, okay, it's like anything that glorifies God, we're gonna listen to. Like, if it doesn't glorify God, I don't want it, Mm-hmm. So, and as we kept watching these videos, Isaiah, he had done a video with Everett, and he was like, I think the video was saying from New Age, to Christ, and he had really talked about weed. Because I was always pro weed. Like, I was like, oh, Christians can smoke weed. It's from the earth. It's from here. It's not like...
It's like the Bible doesn't say do not smoke weed.
Yeah, that's exactly what we would say. And in his video, his testimony really spoke to us. Like, okay, like it has a lot of spiritual consequences. And we were like, oh, it really spoke to me because I was like, okay, that's probably why we felt the way we felt on the acid. And whenever I would have a bad trip when I started smoking, that's why I would feel paranoid. That's why I would feel like scared, like someone was watching me. You know, like I never liked it. That was always the cons of smoking, because I usually would enjoy it, but I always felt, paranoid. So it really spoke to us. And in the end of the video, they were like, like it's an open door. Even having that can allow, spirits in your home. And they just started talking about just other objects that can also be spirits. And from that night, we were just we got rid of, I think, all the weed, all our stuff. We had bags, all the pipes, bongs. We threw them away, right? Because we were trying to sell them, because we had spent good money on them. So we're like, just trying to sell them. And that night we ended up just throwing everything away. And I think the last thing we kept was like our dab pen. And after that, we threw everything away. We felt so much better. And even like after those videos, they would go through prayers of renouncing, and just like self-deliverance prayers, and we would be like following them right after the video, just kind of praying. And that's when we really began to have our own encounters, and really began to feel like the Holy Spirit. And like, I think like a week later, I was working. I got home from with my coworker, and I was driving home. I had my pen. I hit my pen. I was feeling good, and I think I started playing a song. It was like a Christian song, and I started like trying to uh, worship Jesus. And immediately, because I was high, I started, obviously I knew what I was like. I was um, thinking about God, and from like that moment, it just felt dirty. I was just like, whoa, like I've never felt like this, like I felt so convicted. I think that was the first time I felt conviction. I was like, I can't be mixing these two, I can't be smoking and worshiping God, like I was like, whoa, okay, like, all right, Lord, like I can't be mixing this, so I'm gonna choose you. I'm not gonna choose the weed. And I think from then on, that's like the last thing we left was like the dab pen, because it was just small, it was easy, it would just give us a head high, and I remember that moment so clearly, because that was the first time I realized like I can't be mixing almost like the world with Jesus. It's either you go all in or you don't. Just like he doesn't have no grandchildren. So from then on, we started looking into getting delivered. We were watching Vlad, and we had realized he was from Pasco. So we're like, oh, that's cool. Like let's whenever we go down, let's sign up and we can go to Hungry Gen. We've never heard about it, so we want to go check it out. And we signed up and went to the service. At the end of the service, towards the end, he called up everybody and we went up for prayer. And we were thinking we were gonna like manifest, right, and start yelling like we've seen on the videos. And we got prayer, and we felt like some stuff got let go. We felt lighter. But we were like talking and looking at each other like, but we didn't scream, we didn't do any of that. Other people were beside us. We're like, whoa, like what's happening to them? And we're just like thinking like, did it work? Do we need more deliverance? And later on, we realized and learned that it's not always the case. Sometimes your deliverance can be quietly, it can be a simple cough, yawn, but, we were expecting it to be crazy. So we were just like, okay, we went for prayer. Like, okay, like we felt like we needed that, because we've never gotten anything confronted, any spirit like that, any deliverance done on us. So we're like, let's go do it. So we did. And, little by little just started, you know, having our own encounters with Christ and the Holy Spirit, starting to like witness to her brothers and my friends, like, hey dude, like this is real. This is the spiritual side of things. Like I was still learning, so I didn't have a lot of information to back up all and answer all their questions. But I was very like zealous, like I wanted for them to know, and
He would listen to like a lot of debates that Christians would have, like big issues, I guess, and kind of like research that way as well, So because a lot of the people that he worked with, some of them were Christians, but they would do these things, act a certain way, act exactly like the world, So when he would have these conversations with them, and he would tell me, he's just like, oh yeah, like, well, they said this, they're living this type of way, He would look into like these arguments and like read the Bible, and like they were all backed by scripture. And it's like, oh, okay, like it makes sense, So we started looking into things like that, and that's how we learned so much. Every single day we were reading the Bible. I think Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, we were watching the live streams that Isaiah would do, and Pagani, and like all of these YouTube ministers. We tried to look for a church up in Kent, and we did go like once or twice to one that we had found. But while we were up there, I was very against like going to a church. I was like, the church, like, we have our online pastors, like, we're doing fine, like with them, like, we don't need to get plugged in. To me, it wasn't that important. And it's like all of these people go to church, look at the lifestyles that they're living. Like, the church isn't doing anything for them. Like, we're having a much better relationship with God at home, us seeking him, and doing all of these things. Like, we don't need to be at a church. It's because his parents were always so like, you guys need to go to church, need to go to church, need to go to church, like trying to shove that, in our lives, that we were like, no, we don't. Like, we have a relationship with God without us being at church. We didn't see the importance of, having other people to be able to talk to fellowship with, to, go through things with, or to have like for prayer as well, to seek for advice or something. So to us, it was like, we don't need a church. And we went to this church like twice before we moved back. And then when we came back from Seattle, we had a roommate that we let stay with us the last couple months. And our plans we're gonna move out with him, into a bigger apartment, and then we're all gonna share like the rent. We were gonna pay about the same amount, if not, I think a little bit more, because we were gonna split it 3 ways. It was us 3, so we were like, oh, like, we're gonna pay 2/3 of the rent. And then we had a disagreement about like who gets the master bedroom. It was a couple living with like a single dude, and he was like, oh, I want the master bed. We kind of got mad about it, and we're like, we're paying 2/3 the rent. It came into like this whole disagreement, and we were like, no, you know what, like, the whole reason why we were gonna like renew our lease, or like look into a different apartment, was just to help, him out. Things didn't end up working out. We're like, we could move back. Like, we already have our hours to journey out in our careers. So we were like, okay, like, you want to do that? And we're like, yeah, it was kind of spontaneous like that. It was a Sunday when we had, gone to see the apartment that we were gonna get. And the only reason why we didn't get it was because it was a Sunday. It closed at 1. We went right before 1, and it was closed. Like, we had gone like an hour before, and it had closed. I don't know if it was like a holiday or something, but they closed the bank, so we couldn't get the money we needed.
Even the money order we were trying to also get, our card wasn't working.
Everything was
declining. What is going on? Like, oh, well, we'll wait for Monday.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what our mindset was. And as we stayed talking about it, like how my wife was saying, like, we were just realizing, like, okay, we were helping them out. We could also move back. Like, we have enough experience to where we can get hired. So we're just like, let's do it,
Yeah, so we were like, first something, our cards declined. First something, the money orders didn't go through. All of this stuff, like, it didn't happen, So we ended up deciding that day, like, okay, tomorrow we're going to put in our 2 weeks. So we did. The next day, put in our 2 weeks, and, got ready to end up moving back. We moved back, and thankfully his parents let us stay with them. They have a pretty big house where, like, the downstairs basement area wasn't being used. So they're like, oh, you guys can stay in here. We fixed it up and moved in there. And they were like, as long as, like, you guys are living here, like, they wanted us to go to church. So even though we had our online pastors, we were like, okay, like, well, we'll go to church with you guys, but I never felt comfortable going to that church. It wasn't my family's church. I didn't grow up there. The environment was different. It was all of his family that would go, and it was a very small church. So if there was anybody new, it's kind of like all eyes were on you. So when I would go and I would try to worship, it's like, I can't go to the altar because then everybody's like, oh, look, the new girl's going up there. It's like, is she going to manifest? Is she going to cry? Is this going to happen? Like, it just kind of felt like it was just tense, and I didn't like it. And like, we would go, and people just always had like comments that they would make where it just felt like it was very
and since it's a small town, like, everybody went to high school with each other, parents, and
Everybody
everybody just
knows each
knows.
other.
Everybody knows each other.
Yeah, we didn't really. I didn't really like that. I wasn't comfortable with that. I mean, he grew up there, so to him it was fine. But I wasn't comfortable with going there. I was like, no, like we're starting fresh. We need to find like a church that works for both of us. Like I don't want to be going to a church where I don't feel like I can praise God freely. And
We were
so
actually thinking of going to Hungry Gen, huh?
yeah,
We
we
were
were
just
like,
like,
we're gonna
let's.
make the drive to Tri Cities every
Yeah,
day.
I was like, even though it's like 50 minutes, I was like, that's fine. I was like, I will tell her, people used to walk miles to go hear Jesus. Like, why can't we drive 40 minutes, 50 minutes?
Yeah.
So we're just like, okay, we had that mindset, and
We were actually starting to get a little bit more involved with his parents' church. They wanted us to become the youth leaders. And so we had gone and like spoken to the youth a couple times. There was times that we wanted to say things, and like we really learned a lot about like deliverance and stuff, and
like spiritual warfare.
spiritual warfare. And those were things that like I realized, like we would go to his church, and they wouldn't really talk much about things like that. It was more like every time I would go, I would feel offended because his grandpa or like somebody, whoever was preaching, would say something about Catholics. So it was like why do you guys always have to bash on Catholics? Like how are you gonna like have a guest here that's, you don't know what their background is and you're just bashing on Catholics? Like that's not really the way to bring someone into the church. It's kind of making it look like you're just hating on other religions. So it's like, oh, like Christians are supposed to love each other and they're over here hating other religions. So it made me feel really uncomfortable coming like from a person that had a background as a Catholic. So I didn't really like it for that reason either. And when I would go, it wasn't really about spiritual warfare. It was like a nice sermon, yeah, it was convicting. It was good, but I don't know, it wasn't much about well, like we said, equipping their people for spiritual warfare and like learning how to fight, the enemy. And that was something that we went through a whole season of like learning, online with our online pastors, learning spiritual warfare and engaging in that battle. And we noticed like his grandparents' church wouldn't really do that, and especially with the youth, like they were all going through something. So we're like, they need to be raised up to be prepared to go into a spiritual battle. Like these kids don't even know what an open door means spiritually. Like we went up and we said our testimony in the church, and they didn't know like what that meant. They were all just kind of like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? We're just like, to us, what like was the basics. To them was they were so lost with our testimony. They didn't understand the spiritual aspect of it, and letting things in, into your life and how it can affect you, like open doors and soul ties, things like that. We couldn't talk about these things. These were all things that we were like, we need to teach them, teach these young people what all of these things are so that they're prepared and they know how to pray, they know how to fight. And when we had kind of talked to his parents about it, they were more, they didn't even like using the term like demon. They were like, oh, like don't say that, like you shouldn't say that word, and it was just like, why? Like you have spiritual authority, in Christ over these things. So to us it was just like we didn't understand. We were like, well, if we're not going to be able to speak on certain things, then maybe we shouldn't be youth leaders here. And they were very what's the word, baby? Like not religious, but legalistic with things. So we were going, and then they were like, oh yeah, if you guys are going to be youth leaders, then you're going to have to dress a certain way, and you're going to have to wear like your skirts, and you're going to have to wear like the velo and like do all of these certain things. And I was just like, but why? Like I don't see like a need for it, like it, to me it was just like I'm fine, like I'm dressed modestly, like I'm not, wearing provocative things, and they're like, no, well, like you're supposed to be wearing a skirt and like a dress and this, and I like, it was just like a big thing for me that I was just like, I don't see why. Like it just felt like I was like they were trying to change me into like this I don't know, stereotype or this standard or something where I wasn't comfortable with it. I didn't grow up with it, and to me it was like there's nothing wrong with praising Jesus with some jeans, like praising Jesus with a hat on. To me, it wasn't something that was a huge deal. So I would like, we got into a conversation with them, and I was like, well, how are you going to sit here and say that, somebody that praises Jesus with a skirt on, or without a skirt on, like jeans on or a hat on, isn't saved? And they're like, well, that's between you and the Lord. And it's like, okay, well, the Lord hasn't worked on that with me yet. Like, he hasn't made me feel like that's wrong, so we just decided, you know what, like, we can't come into an agreement. I was like, I'm not gonna be like telling people like, you need to do this and you need to do this, or your worship doesn't count, your relationship with God doesn't count, or your prayers don't count. To me, that was wrong. So I was like, no, like, maybe we shouldn't get involved, we shouldn't, go further. We should just look for our own church. As a matter, like, I was already uncomfortable there to begin with. So I had a cousin named David Almaguer. We call him Fido. He would come to Breakthrough Church. And he had been talking to us for a couple of weeks since we had moved down, I think. And he was always inviting us. And we wanted to go, but we were just kind of like, oh, I don't know, like, had an excuse. And finally we were like, you know what, like, we'll go, like, we'll try it out. He told us that Vlad would come and preach, that like the churches were like brothers, like they were really close, like they would get together and do things. So we were like, okay, you know what, like, we wanted to go to Hungry Gen. If Hungry Gen comes here, then this church must be, like, there must be something about this church, So we decided to check it out. And when we came, we were greeted with so much love. Like, we didn't know anybody here, and everybody was talking to us like they were just so happy to see us. And it was just so welcoming and so loving, like nothing I had experienced before. At Catholic church, everybody's just kind of there, like in their own worlds. You go, take your seat, don't talk to anybody, like it's just quiet and conservative. At his church, it was all family, so like the family would kind of talk to each other, but it was just different. It was a different environment completely. And I didn't know anybody here, so I was like, I don't care, like, if I manifest, if I worship, if I cry, like, nobody here knows me, like, I'm gonna praise God the way that I want to. And I felt most comfortable being able to do that here. So we started inviting like my family, my parents, my siblings. We would talk to them about God. Like, after our experience, we would tell them. And it was so hard to talk to them because they had this way of life for so long. So when we came and we were like, oh, like, you're listening to this song, like, I would tell my mom, like, Ma, like, maybe you shouldn't listen to this music. Like, we really learned that, like, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Like, you're speaking this over your life. Like, the family could be cursed, like, we need to go through like repentance and like renunciation with all of these things. Like, we need to do all of this. And they were just like, oh, okay. Like, oh, like, they kind of started seeing us as like, oh, like, you're becoming a religious Christian. To them, it was like they never had these good experiences with Christians. And they're like, wow, like, you let his family like take you over, and it kind of felt like that to them, like they were converting me. And I was like, no, like, little did you know that, like, I would tell them, like, his family was what made me not want to become Christian for so long, because of the way that they would say things, or like it didn't feel like it was preached out of love, but like they were just being judgmental all the time and looking down on me and my family. Like, they would talk about things that we would do or something and be like, oh, yeah, this is wrong because this and this. And it just felt like we were being attacked. So it just made me never really want to turn to Christ, because it's like, you're supposed to be loving, and you've never once made me feel loved. So to me, it was a really big thing where my parents were upset at me because we were, turning Christian, and I was like, it's not because his family turned me, it's our own experience that we went through. And we would talk to his family, and they were mad at us because we were leaving their church. So it was like we were kind of getting like backlash from both of our families, and it was a really tough time, having to kind of like explain everything to everybody. It was like, you know what, like, we went through our experience and we're making this decision ourselves to be closer to God, so when we would talk to my parents, my dad I would try to have conversations with him, and he would kind of engage, and then he would just like, it would come to a point where he would kind of like get a little mad or something, or triggered, and he'd just be like, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Like, just stop. I'm not going to get into this conversation with you. And then I couldn't really bring Jesus into the conversation anymore. It got harder and harder, and then my brother started coming with us. We would talk to my siblings about God all the time and tell them, like, guys, like, this music, like, we wouldn't tell them things like, oh, like, you're doing this and like that's wrong, like this. We wouldn't tell them things like that. We would try to explain to them, this is what we went through. Like, we thought that it was okay. Like, we thought that all of this music was fine. As soon as, like, you open yourself up to, like, the supernatural, like, with, like, these drugs, it's like we were able to see all of these things in the spiritual that we weren't able to see with the naked eye. And now we understand why it's wrong. Now we understand, like, why we were going through, like, these cycles, in our life, where everything was just downhill. Same for my siblings, that were fighting depression as well. So I would talk to them and, like, tell them, like, this music has a huge influence, and then we got them, like, to come to church with us. And my brother, little by little started coming as well. And my family started, like, kind of seeing, the change in me and my husband and in my brother. It was a little bit harder for my brother just because it took a little bit, longer, and he's still working, and Christ is still working in him. He's working in all of us, actually. But, where they were like, oh, my parents kind of tried to look at it like, like, oh, like, you're taking your brothers too, like, you're taking your siblings too. And it's like, no, come and experience it with us. Like, they really like it. They like it for a reason, like, they go to Catholic church and, like, they tell me they don't want to be there, like, they want to come to our church. They feel the move of God, like, just come and experience it. And I think their first time coming to Breakthrough was our baptism, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so
our baptism, and that same day we dedicated our daughter.
Yeah. So that day we got both of our families to come to our church. And my parents really liked it. To them, it was like a completely different experience, So it was from going to Catholic church their whole lives to experiencing this church. So they kind of started to understand, like, oh, okay, like, this is why the kids like it here. Like, it's in English, for one. Like, we were always used to going to church and it being in Spanish. There's that language barrier where you kind of understand, but not too much. And then, so they started letting, like, my siblings come with us as well. And little by little, we kept talking to them. My siblings would talk to my parents. I would talk to my parents, and my dad spoke to me one day, and he told me, like, oh, I want to be a part of my granddaughter's life, and I want to be in her life, to see her grow. I want to take care of myself, my health, spiritually as well. Like, I want to do better, and I was like, you can. I kept praying for him, and I wanted to see that change in his life. Like, he was so bound by, like, alcoholism. He would drink every single day, and if he would drink liquor, he would kind of, like, get into his feels a little bit more, get more upset. There was a time that he was listening to this song, I think it's called Save Me, on repeat, and it was heartbreaking to me. I hate that song. I can't stand it now. But when he was singing that song, I was just so heartbroken for him. I was getting into prayer for him. Like, I read in the Bible, as soon as, like, the head of the household turns, to Christ, that he'll turn the rest of the family. Like, he will save the rest of the family. So I was going all in for my dad. I was believing Christ for my dad. And we were coming to Breakthrough, and one day Pastor Z came, and he was preaching and singing and stuff, and he comes, and, like, I was worshiping with my hands up, and he comes and he grabs my hand and he tells me, God sees your tithe. So to me, that was a huge thing, because I would pray to God, like, God, speak to me, only something that only you would know, and we had only started tithing, like, twice. It was our second time tithing. And so when he told me, like, oh, God sees your tithing, and he says, like, you're doing good, I was like, wow, like, that has to be from God. Because I know Pastor Brian didn't go and be like, oh, like, that's Desiree, she's tithing now, like, tell her this and this. So I was like, that has to be from God. He got my attention right away, and he was like, he says that you're doing good, like, keep it up. He was like, and, He wants me to tell you that somebody that you're praying for is going to be saved. Just keep praying for them. And I was praying for a lot of people, all of my friends, my family, my loved ones, everybody. I was praying for everybody. But in my heart, I knew it was my dad. I knew God was going to save my dad. So since that day, like, I was like, okay, like, looking forward to it. Like, okay, God, like, what are you gonna do? Like, right now, like, it seems impossible to me that you're ever gonna do anything in my dad's life. It seemed impossible to me that my dad would ever get baptized, become a Christian, or like preach the word or read the Bible. Like, he believes, but it just, for him to like do a 360 and like come to Christianity, come to God in that way, to me it was like it would take a miracle. It was just so hard for me to talk to him sometimes. And I slowly started seeing God at work in my dad. And I would talk to him and he would tell me like, oh, like, I'm wrong in this area, like, I messed up in this area, and I want to correct it. I want to do better, like, I want to work at this. And I was just like, wow, like, I feel like him having his granddaughter, really wanting to be a part of, her life, seeing her grow and, doing better for her, being a better man in her eyes as well, was a huge part of it. So now, like, I talk to him, and I see him, talking to his friends, like, he still drinks, God is still working in him slowly but surely. And he's talking to his friends and he's like, oh yeah, like, preaching to them, talking to them about God, telling them, oh, like, pray, have a relationship with him and this, with a beer in his hand, but he's talking to them about Christ. And that's something that I never thought that I would have gotten to hear. And I look at him like, I'm so proud to see like how far he has come, how far God has brought him, all glory to God. And I would sit there and I would cry to my husband, I would cry to God and tell him like, you promised me that you were going to save my dad. Like, you promised me that you were going to save somebody. And I don't see it. Like, it looks so far, like, from how things are going. Like, my family, it felt like my family really fell apart when we moved to Seattle. And coming back, I know we were brought back for a reason, and coming back into my family, being able to talk to them about Christ, bring them to breakthrough, try to implement a relationship with God in their lives as well. And now my parents seeing us and how much we have changed. In the beginning, it was just like, wow, like, you guys have changed. But now it's like, you guys have really changed, like, they see the difference in our marriage, that the difference that Christ makes in our marriage, and I've talked to my mom and she's like, I'm so proud of, how far you've come, how much God has worked in your life. She sees the difference that, in our marriage now that we have Christ, the man of God that my husband has come to be, and the woman of God that I've come to be as well. So seeing that for them, I feel like my mom has told me, it inspires her, to really develop a relationship with Christ and implement it in her marriage as well. Get a foundation in Christ, and in her marriage. And I'm just so happy now to be able to talk to them about these things, to be able to have a conversation with them, and to offer prayer to them. That was something that was always so intimidating to me. I was like, if I ever ask my parents, like, do you need prayer? Like, I feel like they're going to reject me, like, rebuke me or tell me no, And now, like, if my dad has pain in his body, my siblings are going through something or anything, like, I always do my best to try to lead them to Christ, try to show them, what a relationship with Christ will do, because I see what it has done in our lives. So I now ask them, like, do you need prayer for anything? Sometimes I still get nervous, and my husband will be talking to my dad and he'll tell me, like, I feel like we should ask your dad if he wants prayer. And I'm just kind of like, not that I don't want to, but a part of me is like, oh, okay, like, here we go, like, see what God's going to do, but still get kind of nervous praying for people, especially out loud. It took us a while, being able to do that as well. I had to learn how to pray. That's something that I didn't know how to do. So we started praying out loud before bed, praying out loud together, over my siblings, over our family members, over situations, especially now that we have our daughter, now trying to teach her, and it's like, my family used to only pray at Thanksgiving. When we would have like a Thanksgiving dinner, we would pray every Thanksgiving, but now it's like we're all gonna eat, and I would be like, guys, like, remember, like, we're gonna pray. And now it's like I serve them their food, and if they don't want to wait for everybody to pray, they just do their own prayer, they're like, all right, like, I'm a munch, but I'm like, it makes me so happy to see like God working in their lives. They're developing that relationship with God. And now I tell my daughter, like, we're gonna eat, and I have her plate, and she's so eager to eat. And I'm like, Mommy, we pray. Like, I put her hands together, and she'll put them together. And then I hear her playing and laughing while I'm trying to pray with her. But she looks around, and she looks at all my siblings. She looks at my parents. She looks at Abdiel. And she's like looking to see what everybody's doing. So everybody, if they're in the fridge getting something, they're at the stove cooking something, or just walking by, they'll stop what they're doing and just like go like this. And she sees like that they're praying, and she's like, oh, like, she'll put her hands together. I'm like, I'm so glad, like, it's these moments, implementing, Christ in our everyday lives. Even if it's something as little as praying before we eat, it's like, I really want to do that for my daughter, really raise her in Christ, showing her, what it's like to have a relationship with him at home and not just at church, because that's something that we never really seen, so it was like, oh, just church, church, church. But it's like, we know that a huge part of the church is not going to make it into heaven. You need to have that relationship with Christ at home. So that's something that we've learned. And now having, our baby and moved back here, it has been a challenge, to continue to have that relationship with Christ the way that we were when we were in Seattle. We had our own space. It was just us two. We could do whatever we want. Now we get home and we're tired. We don't really have our own space. We're working at it, but, it's trying to find time, and I'm like, okay, now what I've realized has started to work a little bit better for me is like setting alarms. Like, if I have an appointment with God. There's still times where I'm like, oh, I'll just do it later, and then I just don't do it, but that has really helped. Now, even if it's like a quick trip to the bathroom or something, like any time that I get, I'm like, I'm gonna pray. I'm up at night, I can't sleep. I'm like, I don't know what else to do besides pray. I get into prayer, and it's like, sometimes it's like, I think about it, I'm like, man, that's kind of sad. Like, I fell asleep in my prayer with God, but I wouldn't want to fall asleep any other way, talking to anybody else but him. But now that's kind of where I'm at in my relationship with Christ now, from how far he has brought me, is now we're on fire for him, seeking him any moment that we can, preaching to people about Jesus anytime that we can. As soon as we get to talk to somebody about Jesus, it's like, oh, like, here we go, like, we used to like tag team people and like talk to them, and be there for like an hour, 2 hours, talking to like my siblings or friends or something, explaining our testimony, and it's just so much better like when we were together, because he would say something and then I would forget something, and we'd just kind of fill in the blanks and stuff. So
yeah, it's been just amazing, and our marriage has never been better, since Christ is the center of our marriage. It's like we noticed a big difference when we were just dating and doing good versus us being together and seeking Christ together. It's just it's life changing. It's never been the same. So, and it's just always crazy to look back and think, at our testimony, because I didn't trip out. I wasn't freaking out during that time, during the acid trip. My wife was, and I was trying to calm her down. So it always makes me think, like, if I would have taken it somewhere else with someone else, I would have enjoyed my high. I would have enjoyed it, and it makes me think, like, where would I be today? So I thank God that everything happened how it happened, his perfect timing, and that we took it together and we started seeking Christ together, So I always look back and thank God about that, just because seeing her encounter God and seeing her like have that fire to like, okay, let's do our own research and let's seek, it was what really stirred that fire up in me and really made me want to step up and be a man of God, not only for her but for my descendants, and just to have a relationship with Christ, because I never had that, like how she was saying, it was only just in church, never really saw anything at home. So I was just like, you know what, like okay, I'm gonna go all in for you, God. You know, even though I didn't have that experience, but I seen her, and it's what made me really want to go all in for God. So yeah, and now we're, you know, with our second baby, you know, happily married, you know, all cause of the Lord, you know, all glory to Him, you know, and now He's just been molding us to the men and women of God He's created us to be, and just giving us a heart to serve, you know, like there's a saying, you know, you're saved to serve, not to get full. So, you know, now we just want to bring others to Christ, you know, people who are lost like we were, and, you know, just win souls for Him, and just bring and lead people to Christ. So yeah, this is our testimony, and you know, I pray and hope that edifies you. It brings people to Christ and gives Him honor and glory at the end, you know.